specialises. My name is Loizou and welcome to this week's Family Law Show, brought to you by the International Family Law Group. I am your host and I'm joined in the studio today by one of the country's leading family law specialists who deals with cases concerning children. Our programme today is going to look at adoption and give our viewers some general information about this area. First of all, I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about myself, the firm I work for, and then I'm going to introduce my firm. So I'm Loizou. I'm a family law solicitor and partner at the International Family Law Group. I've been practicing family law for a number of years now, and I deal mostly with cases that concern a relationship breakdown, particularly when there are finances involved or where there are children. Some of you may be familiar with me from the work that I do on London Greek radio. For the last 2 years, I've had a fortnightly radio show where we've been giving advice to people within our community. I also write regularly for the Barigiagi newspaper, as well as other family law websites, and I often lecture to other family law solicitors. I work for the International Family Law Group that sponsors this programme. We're a niche family law firm based in Covent Garden, and we provide family law services to both national and international clients. So moving on to today's show, I'd like to introduce my guest, Helen Blackburn. Helen is a solicitor and a partner at the International Family Law Group, and Helen specialises in cases that concern children, and particularly those with an international element. As I say, she's one of the country's leading specialists in this area, and she's highly ranked in many legal directories. So Helen, welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me.
So the format of today's show is we're going to have a number of different questions that I'm going to ask Helen, and she's going to give our viewers some information about the area of adoption. So Helen, what is adoption?
Well, it's a very topical issue at the moment. The government are working very hard to encourage as many adoptions as possible. And technically speaking, it's the transfer of all the rights and responsibilities for a child, which we would ordinarily call parental responsibility, from the birth family to the adoptive parents. The child then becomes the full member of the adoptive family, and the adopted child is deemed to be the adopter's legitimate child. It's treated as if the child has been born to them. An adoption order also has the effect of severing all the legal ties with the child's biological birth family. But in some cases there is some level of ongoing limited contact with the birth family. This is sometimes referred to as letterbox contact, because more often than not it is simply a letter on an annual basis with a short progress report and perhaps a photograph of the child.
And are there any restrictions on who can be adopted?
There are some restrictions. The important thing is that the purpose of adoption is to have a process whereby a child is adopted. The purpose of it is not to create a child-parent relationship between adults. So technically speaking, an adoption order must be issued before a child's 18th birthday, and the adoption order has to be made before their 19th birthday. You also can't adopt a child who has been married or has undergone a civil partnership. So if a child is 21 and somebody wants to adopt that child, it technically speaking won't be possible because that child is no longer a child.
Okay. And who can adopt then?
Well, you have to be over 21 predominantly. There are some limited situations where an 18-year-old or over can adopt, but technically speaking, it's an over 21-year-old. An individual can adopt on an individual basis, or a couple, either in a homosexual or a heterosexual relationship, either married or in a civil partnership or cohabiting, can adopt as well. The idea is that it's open to as many people as possible, and the government's working hard to really open up the issue of adoption to as many possible adoptive parents as possible. There are also other limitations concerning domicile and also the length of time that the adoptive parent has lived in this country. It's always worth double-checking those issues before you embark on the adoption process.
And are there any further restrictions regarding who might be suitable to adopt?
They're very limited. They vary from different region to region. Various adoptive agencies and local authorities have their own criteria, but the idea, as I say, is to open it up to as many people as possible. Clearly, people who have a criminal record involving certain offences against the person, and particularly offences that are against children, won't be classed as suitable as adoptive parents. There are also other requirements where a couple have undergone infertility treatment. It's often suggested that they should wait a period of time before finishing that treatment, and after they finish that treatment, before embarking on the adoption process.
So let's say a client comes into the office and they say, I'm interested in adopting a child. How does that process commence?
The first thing that they should do is to contact their local authority where they live, or a local adoption or a national adoption agency, and express an interest in being considered as an adoptive parent or an adoptive parents couple. I'm sure that they would be only delighted to receive that telephone call, and then the whole process will be explained to them.
So let's talk about that process. What does it entail once you've taken those initial steps?
The first thing, as I say, is to make that initial contact. Make a telephone call to your local authority, or send an email, or make the inquiry in some other way. But let it be known that you want to be considered as a potential adoptive parent. What's likely to happen then is there's likely to be an initial home visit. Somebody from the adoption agency or the local authority is likely to come and visit you at your home, basically to impart some further information to you about the whole process, what it will entail in both time, energy, practicalities, just to make sure that you understand the process, what it will entail before you actually embark on what could potentially be quite a time-consuming and lengthy process. If you are still interested, then you will complete an application form. You will provide the local authority or the adoption agency with information which will enable them to carry out certain checks, crucially a criminal records bureau check. You'll have to provide them with certain references, work references, personal references, which will tend to be long-standing friends or family members who can provide a reference as to how you would be as an adoptive parent. The next process is that you will probably undertake some form of training or preparation. Local authorities and adoption agencies run training sessions involving a large number of potential adoptive parents, where the whole process is explained to them. It's important that adoptive parents go into the process with their eyes open. They have to understand that some of the children that they will be offered as potential adoptive children will have a certain history. It's not like being given a newborn baby necessarily. You may be invited to adopt sibling groups or children who have been in the care system for quite a few years. The next stage is then to start what we call a home study report stage. This is the detailed involvement where the local authority will meet with your personal references. You will have to undertake certain medical examinations. There will be several home visits where the adoption agency or the local authority social worker will come and visit you in your home and speak to you, double check that you understand what is involved. And then at this stage varies in time. It can be several months, can be several years, but hopefully at the end, the outcome of that home study report will be put to what's known as the panel. There will be a report produced for the purposes of the panel, and the adoption and permanency panel is made up of both professional and lay people who then have the responsibility for recommending whether or not the potential prospective adoptive parent is a suitable person for adoption. Fingers crossed, the panel approve you as adoptive parents. And then the next stage in the process is the matching process, where the local authority or the adoption agency will work hard to find a child or a sibling group that matches the type of child that you have been approved to adopt.
And we talk about prospective adopters. When can these prospective adopters apply for an adoption order, and is that an order necessary? How does that work?
The adoption order is absolutely necessary because it's only once the adoption order itself has been made that the adoption is finalised. And as I say, the legal rights and responsibilities that the birth family had for the child are then severed and transferred formally to the adoptive parents. The child has to live with the prospective adopters for a stipulated length of time before the actual adoption application can be submitted to court.
And so it is a court order in effect that you obtain?
Absolutely, it has to be done by court order.
And how long does the court process take once you've got to that stage?
In the scheme of things, once you've done the home study report, which does take some time, the actual court process is relatively swift. It can take a matter of months. You would submit your application and paperwork, and the application and paperwork is then considered carefully by a judge on paper first.
Okay.
The judge may then issue certain directions about how the application will proceed, and then list the matter for an initial directions hearing. After the initial directions hearing, further directions will be given for the remaining paperwork to be lodged with the court, and then steps will be taken to list the final hearing. As I say, the whole process should take a mere matter of months.
And who attends the initial directions hearing and the final hearing? Is it just the prospective adoptives, or who attends these hearings?
Ordinarily, a representative from the local authority who has approved the adoptive parents, and if it's a different local authority who is tasked with care of the child, a representative from that local authority will attend. And if at that stage a guardian has been appointed for the child, the guardian will attend. And also obviously the prospective adoptive parents, who are the applicants, with or without their legal representative.
Okay. And I mean, often couples will come in to see us and they talk about adopting a child from abroad. What does adopting a child from overseas entail?
Well, this is an extremely complex process. Where specialist legal advice is absolutely crucial. There are strict limitations imposed on the making of arrangements for overseas adoption, and it's just not a simple process. We're inundated with requests from people who want to embark on this process, and I always urge caution and preparation. Absolutely crucial in this situation to get specialist legal advice. Basically, if you are involved in the adoption of a child who is habitually resident in one country by an individual or a couple who are habitually resident in another country, this comes under the umbrella of an overseas adoption. And it's governed by certain international conventions to which the UK is a signatory, and it's also governed by strict UK legislation and regulations to ensure that exactly the same protection is afforded to children who are born abroad during this process. It shouldn't be seen as a simple process. It was in the past. It was treated as a lacuna, and people used to try and adopt children abroad because they thought it was the soft, easy option, and it really and truly is not. And there are all sorts of criminal sanctions if the process isn't completed properly. So really and truly, I really would urge caution. You should also bear in mind that if you do want to adopt a child that lives abroad, it's likely to be a more lengthy process as it does involve further stages. It's also likely to be more expensive because unlike a domestic adoption where you will be invited to adopt a child who's already in local authority care, you would be seeking to adopt a child which isn't the responsibility of the local authority. So the local authority would charge you for their costs of undertaking the home study report process. You'll also have to visit the child abroad, and obviously the costs of travel and legal costs abroad have to be brought into the equation too. So it's definitely going to be a more lengthy process, and it's definitely going to be a more expensive process. And I really and truly would urge that anyone really considering this process seek specialist legal advice at the earliest possible opportunity.
And you talked about the inter-country adoption process. Is that any simpler if you're looking to adopt a child that's a relation?
No, sadly it's not. If anything, it's more complex. We're often consulted by people who want to adopt a distant family member, perhaps a childless couple who are offered the child of a cousin or a more distant relative as an option when they've exhausted all sorts of other avenues of infertility treatment. And the simple answer to your question, Lucy, is no, it's not a simple option. If anything, it makes it more complex when the child that you want to adopt is a relative. The immigration authorities are very alive to the fact that adoption shouldn't be used as a way of getting round immigration regulations. This has happened in the past, and the immigration authorities are alive to immigration scams and basically will really and truly scrutinise any application that's made by a relative who is seeking to adopt a distant relative child. And this adds a much more complex additional hurdle, an immigration problem, when you're seeking to adopt a child who is a relative.
Thank you. And I guess really from the type of work that we do every day, adoption's quite a happy thing. I mean, you know, with our viewers, you know, the type of work that Helen and I deal with every day, unfortunately, it relates to usually when a relationship breaks down, but actually adoption is quite a positive thing because you're bringing in someone new into a family and nurturing them into a family. And so I guess, do you find that rewarding in terms of cases that you do?
Absolutely. It's one of the happiest things that we do. Lucy and I are invariably dealing with marital and family breakdown situations where families are going through immense trauma and are disintegrating before our eyes. And adoption is one of the only occasions where we are actually involved in creating a new family. And I have to say it's one of the joys to be involved in that process. And I absolutely love assisting adoptive parents with their adoptive applications for exactly that reason.
Helen, thank you. So just a really message to our viewers, adoption is a complex area. It's a very specialist area of the law, and you know, you should really seek advice from someone who deals with this area. At the International Family Law Group, we do have specialists that deal with adoption, Helen being one of them. And so if this is something that you are interested in, please do contact us and we will be able to help you. So that concludes our programme for this evening. As I say, both Helen and I work for the International Family Law Group. If you do require any family law advice, please do not hesitate to contact either myself or Helen or any other one of our colleagues at the International Family Law Group. Our website is www.iflg.uk.com. Alternatively, you can contact us on 0203 178 5668 and we'll be more than happy to help. So all that remains for me to say is thank you to Helen and thank you all for tuning in, and we look forward to giving some more information and guidance in next week's Family Law Show. Ευχαριστούμε και καλή νύχτα σας.